This demonstration is going to go over the inventory reorder screen, which is the screen that you're going to use to manage your inventory once you've already set up your products and the minimum order quantities and the critical order quantities for those inventory items. So the first thing you're going to do wherever you are in VetView is look across the top icon bar and click on the navigation icon. In the navigation menu that pops up in the inventory screen section, you're going to click on Inventory Reorder, and that will open up the inventory reorder screen. The top portion of the screen is a search mechanism, and we give you two options here. You can either search by specific vendor, so if you order from like 5 main vendors, and you order from those 5 main vendors on different days because that's how your purchasing cycle works, and you spread the costs out, then you might want to search by vendor. The other option is you can search by the unit that you're in, and if you do that, then anything that your unit is responsible for keeping in stock, you can actually generate a list for anything that's at the minimum or below, minimum order quantity or below, and this list will generate every item that is needing to be ordered. So in my case, I have previously been on this screen and I've searched for main storage as the main storage unit. I've generated the list based on that. And because of that, the system's remembered that, and so it's defaulted that in for the next time I come to the screen. So you won't have to type it in every time. The system does remember what you did previously. And then you'll see off to the right, there's an option that says Ignore Pending, and it's automatically selected. And that's because we assume that you don't want to duplicate your orders. So if I'm looking today, and if yesterday I created and submitted a purchase order for one of these items, but it hasn't been received yet, then I don't want to reorder it today because I'm working this list today. So the Ignore Pending is going to ignore the items so long as they're on a purchase order that's either been printed or sent. So it's not, if it's working, that's a whole different ballgame, but if it's been sent to a vendor, then the system's going to ignore that that item is still pending. And once you've done that, if you click the Generate List, you're going to get this option, this question: please confirm changes have been made to the current list, overwrite changes, and generate a new list. If anyone has been on this screen and attempting and has changed anything, so if anyone's been on the screen and has selected, such as this screen had, selected an item to be ordered but has not yet created the purchase orders, it's going to say, hey, changes have been made to the current list. Are you sure you want to overwrite the changes and generate a new list? And if you say okay, then it's going to wipe out what you previously did and let you start over from scratch. If you say cancel, then you can go ahead and work through the list that you're currently on. So I'm going to generate a new list because I want in real time right now anything that might have come up from yesterday or the last time I was in the system. So I'm going to say okay, and it's going to find my inventory that needs to be ordered. All right, and the way you work this list is if you highlight the vendor, you'll notice the inventory list below is going to show you every item that they're the default vendor on that needs to be reordered. So we're at or below the minimum quantity of, or the reorder, yeah, the minimum quantity of, sorry. So if I look here, I'm looking at Aero International. Let's look at Covidian Tyco Healthcare, and I want to do this one for a specific reason. So you just go through each of the individual ones. If you're on one like this and you see that you only have one item to reorder, my reorder actual, the system's actually going to calculate based on what my minimum quantity is plus my reorder quantity minus my current quantity. So in this case, 1 plus 0, which is 1, minus 1 is 0. So my reorder actual quantity is 1. If I had a current quantity of 0, then my reorder actual would be 2 because my minimum quantity is 1 and my reorder quantity is 1. And 1 plus 1 minus 0, if that were 0, would be 2. All right, and then you just select the option. And if I want, when I select this, sorry, you're going to see in the top portion, the selected is going to tell me how many items were selected. So I selected one item. And if it's every item on that vendor's list, then you'll see an all next to it. If you don't see the all, it means that you've missed something in the list, so you haven't finished a complete order for what's necessary to reorder based on your reorder quantity. Which you may want to do. There's from time to time you may want to do that for some specific reason, but that just tells you you got everything on there. All right. One thing on this one, so notice that because I've indicated in my vendor name that I have a $500 order minimum for this particular vendor, I might know that this item is less than $500. You can look if you're not sure by hovering over the information dot, and I can see that my unit cost for that was $205. So I'm not going to reach my order minimum based on this. If I want to look and see if I have an alternate vendor, this little icon with the people says select alternate vendor, and if you click it, if there is an alternate vendor for that item, you will actually see them in the list, and then you can select them as the alternate vendor so that you can potentially meet the minimum requirement on the alternate vendor, especially if there's other items on the alternate vendor that also need to be filled. Alright, so in this case I don't have an alternate vendor, so I'm going to leave it where it is. But maybe I'm not going to order it because I'm not at my $500 minimum. And I can view, again with this information dot, I can see how often I've had to order it. And that allows me to see sort of that history to say, okay, well I'm okay if I wait for a week or two before I order this. Alright, if I were to choose, let me just see if I can find one that has... Oh, it's the same one I was just on, sorry. Here we go. Okay, so if I look at any of these items, so let's just say that the only item on More Medical Corp faxes reorder list was this Cath Foley, this balloon Cath Foley. If I looked here and I saw that it didn't meet my $100 minimum, let's say that was the only item on the list, I could go here and I could switch to Supreme Medical Police Fax. If I switch the vendor here and it were the only one on this vendor's list, when I select the other vendor, the item will actually leave that vendor. The vendor will drop off of the list, and now you could find that item on the other vendor. Supreme Medical, I can't remember who it was. So now if I go find Supreme Medical, you'll see now the Cath Foley balloon for FRC 5cc balloon is now listed on theirs. And I can do the exact same thing if I want to go back to the other, because I notice there's no other items on this one. I can go back, and now if I go back to More Medical Corp, there's my Cath Foley again. So I want to leave it here because I have a $100 minimum. This balloon is, I think it's $32. But I have another Foley Cath that's just $1 something, but I'm ordering 33 of them. And then look at there, I have a punch biopsy that's 100. So I've met my minimum on this, and this is actually what I would prefer to do, is order it where I get my minimum required met so that I get my contracted cost for those items. And then basically you just work your way through the list. So if you have an item that is below the critical quantity, you'll see it highlighted in red. So I'm on Mary X-Ray. They have one item that we need to reorder. There's no minimum that's listed. However, if I unselect the item in the list, you'll see it's highlighted in red. And that means that I'm at or below my critical quantity. So that critical quantity is more than 0. And what's going to happen here is I have my reorder quantity, which is 0. I have my minimum quantity, which is 1. And again, remember, the way that the system calculates the actual reorder amount is the minimum amount plus the reorder quantity minus the current quantity. So 0 minus 0 is 0. The minimum quantity is 1. It's telling me the actual reorder is 1. Now, because I know I'm below the critical quantity, I might want to go in here and add an additional 1 in there. And again, you have the history you can view if you'd like to do that to see whether or not you need to order an additional 1. Notice all of these previous ones, it's going to tell you what the status is. So if I had one that was pending, I would see it here as pending, or in this case, PO printed. So this particular one, if I was going to go into this, and I'm concerned about my critical, like having nothing on order for this, if I look at this info dot, I will actually see that on March 30th of 2015, I put a purchase order in, I printed it, and the assumption is that when you print a purchase order, you mailed it off to the vendor. That hasn't been fulfilled yet, so the dates on this are a little ridiculous because we're in a test system, but I would see that there's one that's been sent or PO printed, meaning that I already have something in the makes for ordering one. So I might want to go back here, and I'm actually going to change this back to the one that defaulted because I also have another one on order. The other thing I might want to do is, because that date was so old, I might realize there's something wrong with that I haven't cleaned up from 2015. And so I might want to take note of that purchase order, or I might just want to click on that purchase order and go clear that mess up, basically. I might want to go in there and cancel the purchase order, because after this long, it's probably not ever going to come. Or otherwise, I might want to go check my inventory and make sure I don't actually have another one on the shelf that I got back then. Right, and then once you have worked all the way through your list, you can create the POs. And when you click the Create PO button, for each vendor, you're going to create a new purchase order with the items that you've indicated. So when I click Create PO, the system's gonna refresh to the purchase order screen, and you'll notice the top two, or excuse me, the top one, is the one that I just processed. So there's my More Medical Corp, and if I open that by clicking on it, it will actually open the the purchase order. And I'll see there's my punch biopsy and my two Foley casts that I selected as needing to be ordered. Now, my status is working because I haven't sent it yet. And that's because you need to enter in your university PO number. So you need to have some way of tracking it, of knowing where to pull up the information that you put in the system. And so this is where you do that. And however your hospital, whatever method your hospital has for assigning PO numbers, this should accommodate that. Whether it's generated from outside somewhere and you're assigned the number to use, or whether you have your own set of numbers and you start with 0 at the beginning of the year or whatnot. And maybe that's what it's like a 17 dash, and it tells you what year it is, and you start with 0 at the beginning of the year. Whatever your process is. The requisition and EPO numbers, those are actually going to automatically come back in if you have an interface that works for like an on-campus purchase ordering process. So if you're one of those institutions where the veterinary teaching hospital, the supplies that are ordered or the inventory that's ordered goes through a central processing office at your university level, then you may have or want to build an interface for your university's purchase order process. And that's why the button above actually says send EPO or mark as sent, because either way you want it to mark that it was sent. And then we'll talk about printing in just a minute. So I've assigned my PO number, my vendor's been defaulted in. If I have comments on this purchase order, I can put them here. Delivery instructions, and you may put details there. You can suggest a delivery date, so I'm going to give them a week and a half to send that to me. And you want to identify the unit it's going to is going to pick up what you were on already. So because I queried the main storage before in the inventory reorder screen, it's picked that up. And then the direct inquiries to and the delivery contact can be a separate person. This is based on your hospital setup, so the defaults are based on your hospital setup, but you can change them. And then the charge account is the charge account that you are using to pay for that inventory. Off to the right, you have a very quick number of items ordered, how many were received or canceled, which at this point are always going to be 0, and then what the product costs are. So that's your entire bill, basically. And then you have a chance to go in and make changes if you need to here. You just want to double check that everything is correct. And from this point, so here's my order unit. My order quantity is 133 and 1. Remember, this was the dollar something that we were ordering 33 of. And then, sorry about that. And then once you are ready to send that, if you do the send EPO mark as sent, then it will simply update your status to sent. And if you had that interface, it would send the purchase order out to your central purchase order process for your university. If you are old school or have a different process and you actually send the purchase order directly to the vendor, then you can also print your purchase order. So if you click the print button, this is the system default purchase order that prints out. So you'll have all of the information basically you just filled out on that screen. The purchase order, requisition number, EPO number, if that's relevant, purchase order date, what the status is, etc. And then you just print it out. I'm in Google Chrome. If you're in Google Chrome, you can just hover over the top and you have a print option. If I print this, then you want to make sure that you check your printout, make sure nothing happened with your printer or anything, because when I close out of here, the system's going to ask, did the purchase order print correctly? If you had problems with the printout, you can say no, and it will allow you to print it again. It will keep it in the working status. If you say yes, then the status is going to update to PO printed, and the assumption is that you've sent that to the vendor. So it's a similar concept in the system as the ones that have been EPO sent. So the assumption is that the vendor it's been sent to the vendor so that they can fulfill that request. And that is how you use the inventory reorder screen.